The neuroleptic nightmare takes its toll, a drug-induced lobotomy of kind, the patient now a stranger in the home, a loss of sense of being in the mind. It eliminates facial character, tranquilizes all sensibility, leaves the patient just a passenger, as life takes on complete futility. We cannot see the damage that it does, camouflaged by the illness that it treats. Withdrawal gives such agonizing throes, proposes as a challenge we must meet. There is no choice, we have to see this through, fighting not just illness, but also treatment too.
Thanks very much for agreeing to work with us today, Malcolm, and tell Carolyn's story. I think we met, it was in October, November last year, wasn't it, after you'd been to one of the Minefield seminars and just gathered quite a lot of information about depression and that, because at the time your wife had been suffering a very severe bout of depression, hadn't she? And from the Minefield seminars you decided to come and see me to see how the short-term solution-focused stuff and the hypnotherapy could help. For the benefit of just sort of laying the grounds of the story, just want to give us a bit of background and to how you came to that place.
To Minefield Seminar?
Yeah, and to me, and just a background before, you know, what actually took you there in the first place, and Caroline's journey from that kind of September the 11th time.
Well, Caroline had been ill for about a year, hadn't been in and out of hospital. To start with, she just seemed to break down, and then when she started taking medication, both antipsychotic and antidepressant medication, then she became suicidal and ended up spending a couple of periods in hospital, which weren't really any good for her at all. And then following that, she had an accident where she broke quite a few bones on the road outside the hospital.
And that was because she was quite in a dazed and addled state,
well,
you think, from the drugs, wasn't it?
We were going to pick her up and she came out to meet us, and the medication had just been changed, and she just wasn't in a position to judge the speed of the traffic, and it was a busy A road. And you know, I guess he's lucky really to be still with us after that. But when she was in the medical ward in the hospital, she seemed to improve. She had the real peace that the psychiatric ward doesn't give. But after that time, I decided she wasn't going back in anymore, and we just came home. And really, I suppose for another 6 months, didn't make a lot of progress. We seemed to make a little bit of progress, and at one time the consultant's response was, well, let's have more medication. The medication seems to be being effective. But then we fell back again, in part because there was still some repair to do from the broken bones. But even after we had that done, we seemed to just be in a rut of Carolyn sleeping all day, not being able to do much, not taking any interest in life. And the professionals in the NHS, the psychiatrist and I guess our GP, not being in a position to offer any help. And then my sister-in-law saw the seminar on breaking the cycle of depression without drugs, the Minefield seminar. So I went along to that really in desperation, because you start thinking, well, these guys know what they're doing, and then end up in a position,
medical profession.
And then you end up thinking, well, if they do, they haven't really helped the situation. We haven't moved forward any distance. So let's see what else we can do. And it was really in going to the Minefield seminar that I felt as though there was then some hope, that people were saying, look, there are things here that can be done that the medical profession don't do. And even the simple things, I didn't know, was it good to get her off the bed or not?
So before we go through what you actually got from the Minefield seminar, just taking it back just even a bit further than that, Malcolm, what were the first things that you noticed about Carolyn's behaviour and the changes within her life that really alerted you to the problems?
Yes, it was. Well, it was the bombing at the time. She was really used to sit and watch the TV, watch all the reruns. And our daughter was due to go away on a round-the-world trip the following week into India, and at that time they were talking about taking troops into Pakistan. And she was obviously worried about it, as we all were. But essentially she stopped sleeping. She started worrying, so she stopped sleeping. And I guess it was about a month or so on, 2 to 4 weeks, it's difficult to say exactly, but she started to be psychotic. I didn't really understand what psychosis was in those days, but she started being divorced from reality, started worrying about losing the house, started worrying about having all her teeth out, all sorts of things, started worrying about how to handle Christmas, because my mother was ill and would we go and visit or would she come to us. And no matter how much I tried to say, well, this isn't a problem, we can handle it, she couldn't relate to it. There were just constant worries, which were just nonsense in my mind, but they were, I couldn't satisfy the worries. I couldn't give any rational explanation that could allow her to be relaxed about it. Until eventually just the whole lack of sleep and just caused her to break down one day. I rang from work and she just sort of collapsed mentally trying to make a pizza, which is something she'd always been able to do, just make a base and put some things on it and put it in the oven, but she just had 2 goes and was just in a terrible state. So it was then when we went to the doctor.
Who started to prescribe
Well,
medication?
he, in fact, Carolyn had been before and said, look, I'm having trouble sleeping, and said, well, go and see a therapist, but because he didn't want to give her antidepressants or sleeping tablets. But he really organised, he said, well, I think you need to see a consultant psychiatrist. He said, but it could be about 3 weeks. I said, well, that's not good enough, so we saw one privately in a few days. Who then prescribed an antidepressant and an antipsychotic.
What did you notice after that, Malcolm? Did you notice any difference in her behaviour?
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, there were certainly effects. She was certainly worse and became, I suppose, rapidly became suicidal. She had the shakes. She became staring in her eyes.
Yeah, you used to talk about that glazed look.
Glazed
and I know
look,
it's something
yeah.
I really noticed when I first met her.
So she became more detached. It was almost like it was a lobotomy. It was just, whereas before she was herself and worrying, she really wasn't herself anymore after that time.
So then there was a period of the hospital and the accidents and then coming back to the mind.
Yeah, in and out of the hospital. The hospital really wasn't helpful because of the whole range of medical problems there are in there. Carolyn didn't get the rest that she needed. The psychiatrist kept talking about this broken leg phase when people need to just rest. And the broken leg analogy was that if your leg hasn't mended enough, you can't start to walk on it. Therefore, you just got to lie down until mentally you can start to walk again. You are strong enough to go back into life, whereas really perhaps that wasn't the right thing to do.
I know that when I first met you both, you'd already started to put a few things into practice from your experiences and your understandings at the Minefield seminars. Do you just want to go through just 1 or 2 of the things that you really came away with from the Minefield seminar and the things that you started to do?
Well, the first thing was, do you let people sleep on the settee all day, or do you get them up? So we would get up and we'd walk around the block about a mile twice a day. We just go out. We would, irrespective, we would go out. Deep breathing. So we started trying to do deep breathing exercises as a way of trying to become calmer.
Is that longer breath out? That sort of.
That's right. Taking the short breath and then the longer out breath. One of the things was they must have jobs. I'd taken over all the household jobs. So we put back in place a couple of things. So Carolyn had to load the dishwasher and unload it. And she had to put the rubbish out. So they were things.
Tasks, really.
Yeah,
so you
tasks.
set her tasks. I think you'd also started going swimming, hadn't you? Tried to.
We started
around about that time.
We a little bit around that time. It was 2 or 3 weeks later because her shoulder wasn't quite well enough. But then we started going swimming to try and get some exercise.